Drawing a happy jellyfish is easier than you think, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it, no matter your skill level. Hey, hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos, and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. And with that said, grab your drawing tools, and let's get started. Now just a quick note before we start, in this video I'm going to be working in an app on the iPad Pro called Procreate, but you can follow along with pretty much any digital art software or app as long as you're comfortable with the main basic features like brushes, layers, and also blur. You should be totally able to follow along here. So the first thing we're going to do is just create a new layer, and we're going to map out the basic shapes of the different elements, starting with the top of the jellyfish. So just go ahead and create a new layer and rename that layer to, I guess, just top for now. Now in terms of colors in this video, honestly we're going to pick one main color and then we're going to customize it depending on the different stage we're at. So you can really pick whatever you want, and then I'm going to give you advice on how to tweak it as we go. If you need a little bit of inspiration though, go ahead and check out the link in my video description. You're going to find my Procreate Jumpstart Kit, which is a free bundle with a bunch of resources like a few brushes and some color palettes like this berries color palette. So you could always start with one of those color palettes if you want. I'm personally going to just use kind of a bright raspberry color, a little bit like this. But again, you can really pick whatever you want. And for the brush here, you have a few different options. If you're working with a different software, you could just go ahead and pick the most basic round brush you have. So really any kind of round brush that doesn't have texture to it and doesn't have a whole lot of feathering could be a totally great option here. So in Procreate, that would mean in the airbrushing panel, picking the hard brush and making sure that you bring the opacity back up to 100%. That would be the most basic option. That being said, if you have some sort of an inking pencil or a studio pen kind of pencil, that would work even better because it doesn't have texture, that's great. It doesn't have feathering, that's great. But it would be a little bit more sensitive to the pressure of your pencil, which means you would be able to, play with the thickness of your strokes as you go. So in Procreate, for that, you could go in the inking pack that comes with the app and pick the studio pen. That would be what I recommend if you're working with free Procreate brushes. That being said, in this video, I'm personally going to be working with brushes from my inking, stippling, and texture bundle. These brushes are not essential at all, but they're brushes that I made for myself, so I'm going to use them. I really like them, and they're really super sensitive to the Apple Pencil, and they're just going to be perfect for this. So if you want to check them out, they will be linked in the description below, but again, they're really not essential at all. If you do have that bundle though, go in the inking pack and pick the Ultra Smooth Tracing. And here the goal, very simple. We're just going to start by drawing, again, the top of the jellyfish. So this kind of inverted U. And then a bit of scalloping at the bottom. You can then fill in the shape and just zoom in and take the time to refine that shape so you're super happy with it. So it is one thing to draw outlines. You can see I drew mine really quickly. Usually when you fill in your outlines and create a silhouette, you're going to notice that the shape is not exactly what you thought it would look like. Or at least that's what happens to me. So I find it good to just draw the first lines really quickly, the outlines really quickly, and then spend the time to refine the silhouette because this is what matters in the end. So something a little bit like this. So once you have a basic shape that you're happy with for the top, we're going to lower the opacity of that layer because in my mind, I'm doing this jellyfish as kind of a pun. You know, the jelly dessert, the actual jelly that has the ridges, that's what I'm kind of drawing for the top. So I want to have some sort of transparency within my jellyfish. So we're going to just lower the opacity of our top layer to probably 90% or 95%. It doesn't need to be super precise. And then we're going to create another layer that we're going to put below the top. And we're going to rename that one to, let's go with just back. And on that one, we're going to draw essentially the other side of the jelly. Now just be careful here, since it is kind of a half sphere, I guess. The front is curving that way, but the back is going to be curving that way to create, the other side. Otherwise, it's still going to be the same kind of scalloping. So you can draw that really quickly. And then just line the top so you can create another silhouette for the back as well. And same thing, you might want to refine that shape. So go ahead and hide the top just so you can see the back only. And then you can come back and just play with your silhouette. And once you're happy with your back, go ahead and reactivate the top. And you can play with the opacity of the top now that you see the back and just make it however you want. You can really set it to be very light if you want your jelly to be pretty much see-through, or very opaque if you want your jelly to be, well, opaque. So I'm probably going to set mine at around 85 for now, but we can come back to it later as we keep building the piece. For now though, we're going to add the tentacles, and the tentacles, I want them to start kind of in the middle of the jellyfish. So we're going to create that new layer between the top and the back, and we're going to rename it to tentacles. Now the tentacles, I want them to be the same base color as the top, but a little bit lighter and more desaturated. So that's exactly what I'm going to do, keeping the same hue, but just making it quite a bit brighter and a little bit more towards the gray as well. And here the size of the brush is really up to you. It depends on, well, the brush you're using, the software you're using, the canvas size you're using. So there's nothing like just testing it before drawing and finding whatever works for your own piece. And the goal here is to have a thickness that works for one tentacle. So you don't want to have to go back and thicken the tentacle, otherwise you're going to get these kind of weird connection parts, and that's not the goal. So as long as you have something that you think looks good as is, just stick with that. So yeah, whatever works for you is totally okay here. It could be a big brush, a small brush, again, just experiment, and once you're happy with the size, go ahead and draw a few tentacles. Now the idea here is to have that kind of flowy movement, but without making it look like a bunch of wet noodles. So the idea, or the goal, is to keep roughly the same direction in all of the tentacles, but adding a little bit of difference in both, well, the amplitude of that wiggliness, as well as the angle of the different segments. So what I mean by that is you can see these two tentacles are going down, then right, then down, then right, then up and right, more or less. But they're not exactly the same. So that's what I encourage you to do, because if you're just going ahead and drawing some random tentacles, this looks absolutely crazy and also would not work in real life. Not that this is something realistic, but your jellyfish would be floating in the water, so everything would be roughly following the same direction. And here I'm personally going to add, I think, between 4 or 6 tentacles. I'm not quite sure yet. So feel free to experiment. You get more or less depending on how much details you want in your piece. I think I'm quite happy with this actually. Now we're also going to add some arms on the side, which is going to be pretty much the same strategy as the tentacles, but with an even lighter version of your color. I'm going to go with this pink, which is almost bubblegum right now. And we're only going to draw 2 of these arms. We're going to draw them on the side, and at the end of the arm, instead of having something pointy like for the tentacles, we're going to have something a little bit more round, which is going to help our character look a little bit more, I'm not going to say more human, because that's definitely a jellyfish, but it's going to make it look a little bit more like hands. I feel like mine were a little bit too high in the jellyfish. I'm just going to lower them a little bit. You could also rotate them. You can also distort them if you feel the need to. I think I'm really happy overall with them, but yeah, feel free to do any kind of distortion. Really the goal here is just to be happy with the basic shapes. So feel free to pause the video here to take all the time you need to play with your basic shapes until you're super happy with them. And then we're going to meet up in the next chapter, which is going to be adding lights and shadow to really bring this piece to life. So once you're super happy with your basic shapes, we're going to go back in and start adding some lights and shadows to make the piece a little bit more interesting and give it a little bit of character. So for that, just make sure you have your top layer selected. And we're going to grab any kind of selection tool available to us. So in Procreate, we can pick it at the top here. It's this little S icon. And we're going to set it to freehand so that we can make our own selection. Now, one little note here, make sure that this color fill option here is deactivated, otherwise it's not going to work, but otherwise freehand is all you need to select. And we're going to draw kind of a wobbly selection, focusing on the bottom left of our jellyfish top. And then we're going to feather the selection to create a gradient within what is selected. So to feather the selection in Procreate, you can just select the feather option here at the bottom. And here, the amount of feathering is going to depend, again, on your own piece, the size of your jellyfish, the canvas size, but I recommend going with something between 20 and 30%. The exact number doesn't matter as much, but essentially, the lower the number, the harsher the line is going to be in the shadow, and the higher the number, the more smooth, or the smoother the gradient is going to be. So again, just something between 20 and 30% should work well. And from there, we're going to find any kind of adjustment tool available in our software that allows us to change the color of a layer or apply a filter. So in Procreate, we can open up the adjustment panel here at the top. And you're going to notice these first 4 options would all work. And these are all names of options that you're going to find in really pretty much every single digital art software. My favorite to use is hue, saturation, and brightness. Color balance could work well as well, curve as well. So any of those that you can find in your software, go with that. Like I said, I'm personally going to pick hue, saturation, and brightness. And from there, the goal is to make this selection darker. So we're just going to lower the brightness. And we might also want to change the color of it, the hue of it a little bit, just to make the piece less flat, because right now we're just using the same base color for everything. So in my case, I'm going to move the hue towards the left a little bit, which is going to make my magenta look more purple. So you can really play with the sliders here and create any kind of color variation as you want. As long as it is generally darker, that's totally okay. You could go with more of maybe not green, but more of an orange. You can really just experiment here and find something that you like for your own piece. Then from there, we're going to repeat the same strategy, but this time to add lights. So again, just using any kind of selection tool. And this time, instead of drawing shadows, we're going to draw lights. So on the top right, we're going to draw this kind of wobbly oval. And once more, we're going to feather it. This time, probably more around 30% than 20. So just a little bit more feathering than what we did initially. Otherwise, same thing, going back to any color adjustment tool we have. I'm going to go with hue, saturation, and brightness. And here we want lights, so we're going to increase the brightness. And since I changed the hue for the shadows, I'm also going to change it for the lights, but this time I'm going to go the opposite way. So I went left before to add more blue. This time I'm going to go right, which is going to add a little bit more yellow. And that's going to give me this really nice kind of orange at the top. So something a little bit like this. Now at this stage you could also use this same technique without the selection to change the whole color or the whole hue of an element. So let's say in my case I feel like this part of jellyfish might be a little bit too dark and the top might be too dark. I could just go with the whole layer selected, go back to my hue, saturation, and brightness, and just play with the sliders to affect the whole top part of the jellyfish. So I like the fact that it's kind of magenta, orange, and purple, but I think it was a little bit too dark, so I'm just going to increase my brightness a tiny little bit. Now we're also going to use the same technique on the arms and the tentacles, so just going back on the tentacles layer, and we're going to start by adding a shadow at the top. So using the selection tool, drawing a really nice wobbly selection, making sure it is super wobbly because the tentacles are all flowy. So if it's just one straight line, it's not going to look good. But yeah, a wobbly selection towards the top. In this selection, you're really going to feather it quite a lot. So at least 30%, probably more going towards 40 even. I'm going to put mine at 37, why not? But otherwise, again, exact same thing. You know it by now. We're going to use hue, saturation, and brightness. And we're going to lower the brightness to create shadows. I'm also going to create a bit of a gradient in the tentacles. So still using the selection tool. This time a wobbly selection at the bottom, feathering it quite a lot as well, so 38 this time, feeling crazy. And going back with hue, saturation, and brightness. This time I'm going to increase the brightness a little bit, but I'm mostly going to change the hue to get more of an orange at the bottom, or maybe not orange, maybe more peach. I'll try it real quick. Something like that. Now once more, I feel like these tentacles in general might be a little bit too dark, so with the whole tentacle layer selected, I'm just going to use my adjustment tool to tweak the color as a whole. Great! Now the next thing we're going to do is add some of those nice ridges, because again, I said I want my jellyfish to be a bit of a pun, and the jelly dessert I'm taking inspiration in, or from, has these kind of sections, those vertical sections. So we're going to do that exact same thing on the top of the jellyfish. So for that, go ahead and create a new layer above the top layer and rename that layer to shadows. Now here, because we have some color variation within the top, if we were to just pick one color for shadows and paint like right out the gate, it would look a little bit crazy. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply this shadow layer as a blending mode so that we can still paint with one colors, but because it is a blending mode, the software is going to take that color and it's going to change it based on what is underneath. So that's really super handy. And blending modes are usually with the opacity of your layers. So if you're struggling to find it in your software, just figure out where the opacity is, and usually it's right there with the opacity slider. In Procreate, if you tap on the little N next to the check mark, you're going to have, yes, your opacity slider, which we used before, as well as this list with a bunch of random names. And the blending mode we're going to use here is multiply. Now we might also lower the opacity of our layer a little bit for now, just so we have a better idea of what we're working with. I like to set mine at 50%, but we can always come back and play with it later. And here for the shadows, we're going to just pick a slightly darker, quite gray version of our color. So probably middle of the way in terms of brightness, and yeah, more on the desaturated side, but not pure gray. So something kind of like this, honestly, again, doesn't need to be super precise. Now these little ridges, I guess, or these little sections have one edge that is really sharp and one edge that is super soft. So to paint them, we're going to use a soft brush. Now a soft brush, you have a few different options on what you could use. It could be something like, if you're working with free Procreate brushes in the airbrushing pack, well, the soft brush. But as you can see, the soft brush is something you will be able to find in pretty much every software because it is just a round brush with a lot of feathering on the edges. So essentially it's kind of the hard brush that we used before, or that you could have used before, but with a gradient on the edge. So that's one option. If you do have my inking, stippling, and texture bundle though, go ahead and pick from the texture pack the big soft layer builder. It is pretty much like a soft brush, but it has a little bit more texture in it and a little bit more nuances. So it's going to look a little bit less, well, it's going to add more interest to your piece, let's say it like that. Now to make it easy on us to draw those shadows, we're going to use a couple of really neat features. The first one being clipping mask. So go ahead and open your layer panel again. And with the shadow layer selected, just double tap on that to open the layer menu. And from that menu, go ahead and pick clipping mask. Now clipping mask again is something available in most software. If you don't know where it is in yours, just Google whatever name software you're using in clipping mask and you should find them really easily. But essentially what a clipping mask does is now everything we draw on the shadow layer is going to stay within the layer right underneath, which in our case is the top. So for example, if I just draw here, you can see my line is staying within the jellyfish. So that's super, super handy. Now, if you don't have clipping masks, if you really cannot find them, don't worry, you're just gonna have to be a little bit more precise to stay within the line, and you can always just come back in the end, use the eraser, and just clean up your shape. Now, one thing though you might notice here, if I just go ahead and draw my shape, one side is soft, yes, but this side is also soft, and that's not really the effect I want. I want one side of my shadow to be this soft gradient, but the other side I want it to be really crisp, because in theory it would be the start of a different section, so it would be really well defined. So to create that effect really easily, what we're going to do is we're going to use a selection tool, and we're essentially going to draw a selection of that section. So starting with one of the little points in our scalloping at the bottom, following the curve on the side of the jellyfish. Now you want to make sure that curve is really nice, so you might take a few tries to go ahead and do it. Right up to the top middle of the jellyfish head, I guess. And then bring it around to select that section. Now with that selection activated, if we go back in with our brush, I'm going to make mine quite a bit bigger because I really want it to be super soft. If we brush along this edge, we can see we're going to get that really nice soft gradient on one side, but because we're drawing within the selection, this edge is going to stay really super crisp. So we're just going to create essentially selections for all the different little sections we have, and then we're going to brush on one side to add that shadow, and that's going to be it. Super, super easy, super quick. And with that, it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this far in the video, please go ahead and leave me a comment below telling me which color you're using for your jellyfish. And if you're confused with what is this secret password thing, it's a game that we play on this channel. In all of my long form tutorials, I hide a secret password for you to find and leave in the comments. And that does a few things, but the most important thing is just that it gives me a lot of insight into how to edit and pace my videos better. And believe it or not, it's super simple, but it does help me create better tutorials for you. So again, if you've watched this far, just leave a comment with whatever color you're using for your jellyfish, and then we're going to keep going. So this already looks so much better. I don't know about you, but this makes me really super happy. Now we're going to use the same technique to add a bit of shading on the tentacles, because right now it just looks like one big flat shape, and that's not good enough. So same thing, we're going to create a new layer, this time above the tentacle layer. We're going to rename this one to shadows as well. We're also going to apply it as a clipping mask so it stays within the tentacles, and we're also going to use the blending mode multiply. And we also can lower the opacity at 50% for now. So quick recap, new layer named shadows above the tentacles. We have the clipping mask so we can stay within the tentacle shape with our new shadows that we're going to paint. And we're using the blending mode multiply so that our color kind of blends with whatever is underneath and adapt to this kind of darker pink and then this lighter peach color. And here the idea is going to be finding one of the tentacles that you want to be in front of the others. So I'm going to go with kind of this one right here. And then you're going to draw a selection that pretty much just excludes that tentacle. So you can kind of follow the shape of it. Doesn't need to be perfect. So again, it's a little bit hard to see on my screen here what I have selected, but essentially what I have selected is all the tentacles that are under this tentacle I decided is at the top, which means if I go with my big soft layer builder brush or my soft brush, I can quickly add a bit of shading onto those tentacles, which is going to make the one that is at the top look like it's in front of them. So you can see really quick, it takes 30 seconds, but it makes a huge difference. So I'm just going to do the same thing on the other side, going back in with my selection tool and creating a selection around that tentacle. And coming in with my soft brush or my soft layer builder to add a bit of shadows on the tentacles that are behind. And you can repeat this step to have multiple layers of tentacles, I guess, but I feel like having just one at the front, honestly, is good enough for this piece. But if you want to take more time, you could go ahead and say, for example, okay, I want this one to be at the front as well. So you would just repeat the same step, draw a selection around this one, and then shade accordingly. Great, so at this stage we have the main shape mapped out, we have a few lights, we have some shadows. We're just going to start adding details to really make this piece pop. So the first thing we're going to do is actually fix these weird tentacles that just kind of stop in the middle of nowhere. So you can go ahead and hide your top layer, it's just going to make it easier to visualize. And you're going to go back on your tentacles layer, and you're just going to set your eraser to any kind of soft brush you have. So eraser here. And in Procreate, you would just go in the airbrushing pack and picking the soft brush, nothing fancy, but just something that's going to allow you to set your brush to a fairly big to medium size and gently erase only the top of your tentacles to create kind of this gradient. So it's like these tentacles are just vanishing in the middle of nowhere, essentially. But now if you go ahead and we reactivate the top, it's just going to look so much better. It's like they're going in there and then they're disappearing. Now the next thing we're going to do is add some facial features. So go ahead and create a new layer above everything you have so far and rename that new layer to, well, facial features. And here you can draw really any kind of features you want. I'm going to go with a super happy jellyfish. So I'm going to pick a really nice dark version of my base color. Not quite fully desaturated, not quite black either, kind of like this. Otherwise, going back to the same brush we used for the rest, so either the Studio Pen if you're working with free Procreate brushes, or just a base round brush if you're working with a different software, or if you have my inking stippling bundle, the Ultra Smooth Tracing. And you can really draw, again, yeah, any kind of facial feature of your choice. Now I'm gonna go here with, again, this super happy jellyfish. So I'm going to draw 2 inverted U-shape for the eyes, making sure they are centered in their own respective little section. I'm also going to draw a very happy mouth. So this kind of bean shape here. Doesn't look perfect, but I'm going to fix it as a silhouette. I'm just also going to draw a tongue real quick here, but then I'm going to fill in the top and from there just refine the shape to make it look a little bit smoother. But this is really another occasion you have to customize your piece. So you could have an angry jellyfish, you could have just a regular smiling jellyfish, whatever you want here. It's super cartoonish, it's super fun, so you can experiment and really have a whole lot of fun. And since we're drawing these elements on separate layers, you also have the opportunity to just move them around to make sure they're exactly where you want them to be. So using the arrow tool and then just either moving the whole layer around or using the selection tool to draw around one of the elements. Oops. And moving that one little element individually. Now here my tongue is kind of transparent, so I don't want that. I'm just going to color pick somewhere on my tentacles. This kind of color looks really good. Yeah, it's just a very bright kind of peachy color. And I'm going to use that to fill in the tongue. Now to make the tongue a little bit more interesting, I'm also going to add a shadow on the tongue. And here you might notice I'm going really quickly with my explanations. It's just because I know not everyone's going to do the same facial features, so I want to show you what I'm doing, but without spending 3 hours on this, because that's not quite fair. But yeah, I'm making this tongue color a little bit darker. And then I'm just going to draw essentially a crescent moon shape on the left side of the tongue. So again, feel free to just experiment with different kind of facial features, and once you're happy, we're going to add a few highlights to really make the piece pop even more. Before that though, I'm realizing this eye is kind of drifting way to the right, so I'm just going to bring it inwards a little bit. Great. So once you have your facial features, yes, we're going to create some highlights. So for that, create a new layer below the facial features, but above anything else you have, and rename that new layer to highlights. Oh wow, there we go. And for the highlights, we're also going to use a blending mode. For now, I'm just going to use the blending mode screen, but at the end, once we have everything mapped out, we're going to come back and play with the shadows and the highlights just to make sure everything is exactly how we want. So for now, just screen is going to work. And we're going to pick a light, desaturated version of our base color. So yeah, pretty much middle of the way in terms of brightness, but really quite desaturated. It doesn't need to be super precise here. As long as you have something fairly light, that's really all that matters. And you can really add any kind of highlight you want, obviously, but I do recommend highlighting somewhere around your eye, so either the bottom or the top or the side, depending on what shape you have. In my case, I'm just going to outline the bottom. Very simple, as you can see. And then same thing for the mouth, just to help them really pop a whole lot. So since I outlined the bottom of the eyes, I'm going to outline the bottom of the mouth. But if you decided to outline a different part of your eyes, you would just follow along and be consistent with the mouth as well. So you can see it's really subtle, but it does help make these facial features pop a whole lot more. Now I'm also going to use that highlight layer to add little dots and highlights, and also maybe some eyebrows. I don't know why. Oh yeah, that's gonna look cute. So just 2 teardrop shapes for very simple eyebrows. I think it just makes the expression feel a little bit more intense. Very simple. Might also add some freckles. So 3 little dots on either side. Maybe some dots on the hands just to make them a little bit more interesting, because otherwise they're quite flat. Yeah, something like that. And you can really, again, just add any kind of details you want at this stage. I would recommend, though, we all add some highlights on the top of the jellyfish to make it look even more like that jelly I was telling you about. So on the top of each section, just drawing this kind of very long teardrop shape. So it's a long line that has a pointy top and a rounder bottom. And you can see here I'm going to really quickly, so it's not something that needs to be precise. As long as you have them, honestly, that's really all that matters. They really don't need to be perfect in any shape or form. So once you have everything mapped out in terms of the highlights, we can go back in and, like I was telling you about, just play with the different blending modes to see which one you actually want to use. So it's really super easy. You just tap on the little letter next to your check mark and then you scroll through the list until you find something that you like. I quite like Divide. I really rarely use Divide, but I think it looks good in this case. So I'm probably going to go with that, but might lower the opacity a little bit. Yeah. And I feel like these highlights at the top, I definitely want them to be there, but they might be a little bit too crisp. So if you want to soften them up, what you can do is go back to your eraser, which was set to some sort of a soft brush, and then just gently go over the bottom and the top of those highlights just to soften them up a little bit. So they're still there, they're still really important, but they're just a little bit softer and they're less distracting from the facial features. Now, same thing, you can go back and play with the intensity, the opacity, I should say, of your different shadows layer. You can also go back and play with the opacity of your top layer. I feel like mine now is too transparent, so I'm just going to lift the opacity back up a little bit, probably around 90%. But again, you can really just experiment and just play with different combinations of different blending modes and different opacity and see if there's something that you prefer other than what I personally did. So if you find a different combination, that's really great. You never need to do exactly what I'm doing. If you find something that you like more, that's awesome. And you can leave me a comment below and I'll be so happy for you. So take all the time you need here to add any detail you might want to your jellyfish. You could add some sort of a pattern on the top. So you would just, for example, create a layer below your facial features, below the highlights, and you would probably apply it as a clipping mask as well on the top. And then you can just draw any kind of pattern you want and it would stay within the top of the jellyfish. So that's an option you have. Really feel free to go crazy here and customize your jellyfish fully. You could have hearts, you could have stars, whatever you want. And once you're happy with your jellyfish, we're going to move on to the next chapter, the final one, in which we're going to create a bit of a sticker effect to make the piece really pop and come together. So at this stage, the last thing we're going to do is create this sticker effect I was telling you about. And for that, what we need is one layer on which we have everything related to the jellyfish. So to create that layer, we're going to just group all the layers we have so far. So just swiping them towards the right with one finger. And then creating a group from our selection. So just tapping group right here. And you can then collapse the group. Now we're going to create a copy of that group. So if you're working in Procreate, we're going to use the duplicate option. So you can just swipe your group towards the left with one finger and select duplicate right here. And then what you're going to do is you're going to hide the top copy. You're going to select the bottom copy. And you are going to tap on that bottom copy to open the group menu here. And then you're going to select flatten, which is going to merge all of the layers within that group onto one layer. Now here, just so we can see what we're doing a little bit better, because we're about to set that as a white silhouette, we're going to hide our background layer. And then if we were to just go ahead here, pick white and drop it onto our shape, it's going to still not look a silhouette. So what we're going to do here to be able to really fill this in as one solid white shape is we're going to activate what is called alpha lock on this layer. So to activate alpha lock in Procreate, you have a few different options. You can just swipe the layer towards the right with two fingers, or you can tap on the layer and select alpha lock from the menu. Now, essentially what alpha lock does is now everything we draw or drop on that layer is going to stay within that shape. And that also means if we use an option like fill layer, it's going to fill in the entire layer as one silhouette. Now, it's not working super well here because we do have some transparency in our shape. So what we might need to do here is just duplicate our layer a few times until we don't see any transparency, and then merge those layers to have a very solid silhouette. Now, if you're working in a software or an app like Photoshop, you might have a color fill option that you can just apply right out to a layer, and that's going to allow you to set it to white and have a white silhouette. So you have a few different ways to get to there, but essentially the idea here is to have just a white silhouette of our jellyfish. Now at this stage, if you use the alpha lock technique, go ahead and deactivate it. And so we're just going to double check. Yes, it is indeed deactivated. And if you do have a stroke or outline option in your software, you could just go ahead and add your white stroke or outline at this stage to this layer, which, by the way, I'm just going to rename it to outlines. It's going to be a little bit less confusing. But yes, if you have a stroke or an outline option in your software, just go ahead and apply it to this white silhouette, and honestly, that's pretty much the effect that we want. Unfortunately, we don't have that option in Procreate. We don't have a stroke or outline option in Procreate. I don't know why. That would be so handy. But there's a bit of a hack that we can use to create our own outline. So with your outlines layer selected, we're going to use, in the adjustment panel here, Gaussian blur. And we're going to add a little bit of blur. Now the exact amount doesn't really matter as long as you have a shape that is starting to get quite blurry. So probably around, honestly, 10 to 15%. So something kind of like this. You can still see the general shape, but you can also tell it's getting really quite blurry. That's pretty much what you're looking for. So once you have your blurred shape like this, we're going to do a series of steps that honestly don't make a whole lot of sense, but it works in the end. So just bear with me, trust the process. And if you have to watch that section of the video a few times, that's totally okay. And I will link in the description below a blog post in which I have all the steps described as well. So that might make it a little bit easier for you. Essentially here, we're just going to go ahead and we're going to reactivate our jellyfish group that we have just so we can see the outlines that we're going to create. But then still with the outlines layer selected, we're going to use our selection tool, this time setting it to automatic and also activating the color fill option. We are going to tap on the top of the head of the jellyfish. Keeping our pencil on the screen, you can then move it towards the right to have bigger outlines or towards the left to have smaller outlines. So again, I know it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's kind of a hack that you can always use. It is not perfect. If you have pointy elements or a lot of details, it's not going to work super well, but it's better than nothing. So I'm going to set mine probably something like that. And then I'm just going to go back in with my brush tool and I'm going to fix any missing outlines very quickly, very easily. And these are not the crispest outlines either. You can see they have a little bit of pixelated edges, but for what we're doing here, it doesn't really matter. If you were to print this and use the selection as like the edges of the sticker, I would recommend manually drawing your outlines just to make sure they're really soft and they're exactly how you want them to be. But since we're just going for a sticker effect, I think that's totally good enough. And now that we have our outlines, we can go back and reactivate our background layer. Make it a little bit darker than just white, not super dark either, but just kind of a very, very light gray. And you could keep it like that, or we could go ahead and add a bit of a shadow below our sticker to make it pop even more. And for that, super easy, you just duplicate your outlines layer, so just the white layer that we just created. Go ahead and pick the bottom copy and rename that one to Sticker Shadows. Here you can pick again, just a very light gray. I'm just gonna go ahead and hide both my outlines layer and my jellyfish group for now, and just drop that light gray onto the shadow. And then we can go back in, reactivate the outlines layer, reactivate the jellyfish group, but still with the sticker shadow layer selected, using any kind of arrow tool to move that shadow towards the bottom a little bit, which is going to create, well, a shadow. Now, if you want to keep it crisp, you could just stop here. Otherwise, I personally like to have my shadows be a little bit softer. So I'm just going to go back in the adjustment panel here at the top, and I'm going to add some Gaussian blur. So just Gaussian blur right here. I'm going to add just the tiniest bit of blur. If I add too much, it doesn't look like there's a shadow anymore. So just a little bit, kind of like this. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn how to draw more cute things, I highly recommend you check out this playlist because I have a bunch more tutorials for you. But before you leave, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the weekly tutorials I post every Tuesday and Saturday. Then click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.